Remember the most hated woman in Harry Potter? The one who made you angrier than Voldemort ever did? Well, her story didn't end when the credits rolled, and honestly, what happened next is exactly what she deserved. So, today we're covering all of it. The canon ending, the details rolling revealed, the controversy around her punishment, and then we're going deep into the absolutely wild world of Umbridge fan fiction, because the fandom was not content to let Dolores walk away quietly. Not even close. Let's start with the last time we actually see Umbridge in the official story. In Deathly Hallows, Ron, Harry, and Hermione infiltrate the Ministry of Magic using Polyjuice Potion. They're there to steal Salazar Slytherin's locket, one of Voldemort's Horcruxes, a literal piece of his soul. And who's wearing it around her neck like a fashion accessory? Dolores Umbridge, of course. She's sitting in a courtroom sentencing Muggle-born witches and wizards to Azkaban, accusing them of having stolen their wands and their magic. She's the head of the Muggle-Born Registration Commission, which was essentially a kangaroo court designed to strip Muggle-borns of their rights and throw them in prison. This is the same woman who, years earlier, had arrived at Hogwarts as Cornelius Fudge's appointed High Inquisitor, worming her way into the school under the title of Defense Against the Dark Arts Teacher before seizing even more control through a stack of educational decrees that made her the most powerful person in the building. And here's the deeply unsettling detail that captures who Umbridge really is as a person. The locket Horcrux, the one containing a fragment of Voldemort's soul, actually made her stronger. It amplified her cruelty. For Harry, wearing the locket brought misery and paranoia. For Ron, it fed his worst insecurities. But for Umbridge, it was like a power-up. Her nature was so aligned with dark magic inside that locket that it enhanced her rather than tormented her. That tells you everything you need to know about Dolores Umbridge. There's another detail from that courtroom scene that fans obsess over, and for good reason. While sentencing Muggle-borns to prison, Umbridge was also casting a fully functional Patronus. A small, fluffy cat, no surprise there. It sat there on the bench beside her, purring away while Dementors hovered outside the door and a piece of Voldemort's soul hung around her neck. Harry could barely keep his thoughts straight wearing that locket for a few hours. Ron nearly lost his mind. But Umbridge? She was casting one of the most difficult and emotionally demanding spells in existence, in the middle of a room saturated with dark magic, without breaking a sweat. The Patronus charm requires a powerfully happy memory. It's supposed to reflect something good inside you, and Umbridge was thriving. She was drawing on happiness while actively ruining someone's life. That was her happy place. The cat Patronus fits too. Because of course it does. The woman who decorated every surface of her office with kitten plates and pink doilies conjured a cat made of pure light. The aesthetic was consistent at least. Horrifying, but consistent. Some fans have pointed out that this makes Umbridge functionally scarier than most Death Eaters. Bellatrix was a fanatic, but even she probably couldn't cast a Patronus mid-torture. Umbridge could, because for her, the cruelty was the joy. The bureaucracy was the happy memory. She also stole Mad-Eye Moody's magical eye after he was killed during the escape from Privet Drive. She mounted it on her office door at the ministry so she could spy on workers and make them think she was always watching. A dead man's eye used as surveillance as a tool and an intimidation tactic? That's very Umbridge. And before we even get to the Ministry, there's a moment from Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix that the fandom never forgot. When Umbridge finally pushed too far at Hogwarts, it was the Centaurus of the Forbidden Forest who dragged her away. Literally dragged her into the trees screaming. Minerva McGonagall had to suppress a smile. It was the first crack at Umbridge's armor of institutional power. And it planted a seed. This woman is not untouchable. The books end with the Battle of Hogwarts on May 2nd, 1998. Voldemort is destroyed. Bellatrix is killed by Molly Weasley. Pettigrew is strangled by his own silver hand. But Umbridge? Nothing. She just disappears from the narrative. For years, fans had no official answer about what happened to her. The movies don't address it either. The last time Imelda Staunton appears as Umbridge is in Deathly Hallows Part 1, in that courtroom scene. Then, she's gone. Years after the series ended, the truth finally came out. She published a detailed essay laying out Umbridge's full backstory and her ultimate fate. The verdict was clear. Dolores Umbridge was arrested, put on trial, and sentenced to life in Azkaban. The trial itself is more dramatic than you might expect. It took place in Courtroom 10 at the Ministry of Magic, the same courtroom where Umbridge had condemned so many innocent Muggle-borns. There's a poetic justice in that. Visitors were allowed to attend, meaning this was a public reckoning, and the wizarding world got to watch every moment of it. The trial was swift. She was convicted of the torture, imprisonment, and deaths of several people, because not all of the innocent Muggle-borns she sentenced to prison survived their ordeal. She ruined lives and ended some of them. So, what does that mean? It means Dolores Umbridge finally got what she deserved. Azkaban. Dementors finally, right? Well, hold on to that victory. When Umbridge arrived in Azkaban, the prison had already been reformed. After the war, Kingsley Shacklebolt became the new Minister for Magic and implemented sweeping changes across the wizarding government. And one of the most significant was removing the Dementors from Azkaban. No more soul-sucking guards feeding off prisoners' despair. So, while Umbridge was sentenced to life behind bars, she didn't face the same psychological torture that the prisoners she helped send there had endured. The irony is thick. Her victims suffered under Dementors. She didn't have to. Some fans have pointed this out as Umbridge getting off too lightly. She condemned innocent people to a fate that was essentially a living death, surrounded by creatures that drain every happy memory from your mind. And her version of prison was comparatively comfortable. But others argue this actually reinforces one of the central themes of Harry Potter. Evil isn't defeated with more cruelty. Justice doesn't mean revenge. A scene where we watch Umbridge suffer would only satisfy a vindictive impulse. And that is not what the story is about. Now, if you were the Ministry of Magic, would you add a few Dementors just for Umbridge? I sure would. And maybe put them in pink cloaks. Still, there's something deeply satisfying about imagining Dolores Umbridge, a woman who built her entire identity around power, status, and control, spending the rest of her life as an inmate. She went from senior undersecretary to the minister to head of a government commissioner to prisoner. No more kitten plates, no more pink cardigans, no more hem, just a cell and the knowledge that the world moved on completely without her. The reforms went further than just Azkaban. Shacklebolt's administration dismantled the Muggle-Born Registration Commission from the top to bottom, destroying the propaganda pamphlets, and overturned every conviction it had issued. Muggle-borns who survived their sentences were released and offered reparations, though nobody has ever explained what wizarding reparations look like. Probably not a gift card to Flourish and Blots, but who knows. Other ministry collaborators faced their own trials, with varying degrees of cooperation and denial. The entire Department of Magical Law Enforcement was restructured to prevent another bureaucratic weapon like the Commission from being assembled under a single person's authority. The goal was systemic. Make it structurally harder for any future Umbridge to weaponize a government department against its own citizens. Whether that kind of reform sticks in a world where the previous 3 ministers had all been either corrupt, murdered, or imperious is a fair question. But the intent was there, and Shacklebolt had the political capital to push it through. Rowling also revealed fascinating details about Umbridge's personal life that make her even more pathetic. Her father, Orfrid Umbridge, was a wizard who worked in the Department of Magical Maintenance at the Ministry. He was never promoted, and Dolores despised him for his lack of ambition. Her mother, Ellen Cracknell, was a Muggle, and Dolores hated her for that too. For her flightiness, untidiness, and Muggle lineage. Dolores secretly loathed both her parents while publicly pretending to be a pureblood. And once she was arrested and sent to Azkaban, her father lost the small pittance that she had been sending him. Even her family became collateral damage. What the essay also revealed is that Umbridge had a brother, and he was a squib, someone born into a magical family with zero magical ability. So, Dolores Umbridge, the woman who built an entire government commission to persecute people for their blood status, grew up in a household with a Muggle mother and a squib brother. She disowned her mother at 15 and never spoke to her or her brother again. Her career trajectory tells the same story. She joined the ministry at 17 as an intern in the improper use of magic office, which is about as glamorous as it sounds. She climbed through a combination of fake smiles to her bosses and ruthless credit stealing from her colleagues. By 30, she was running the department. She also spent years trying to marry one of her superiors, any of them. She apparently had no strong preference, because a powerful husband meant more status. None of them were interested enough to follow through. What a surprise. Which is one of the few deeply satisfying details in the whole essay. And according to the expanded backstory, nasty things tended to happen to people who asked too many questions about her father or her family history. She never specified what kind of nasty things. She rarely had to. Her wand was 18 inches long, made of birchwood with a dragon heartstring core. Unusually short, which Rowling has suggested symbolized her overcompensation for deep-seated insecurity. Even her wand tells the story of a small person trying desperately to seem big. The cruelty was baked in from the start. One more detail from the expanded universe. In The Cursed Child, there's an alternate timeline where Voldemort wins the Battle of Hogwarts. And in that timeline, Umbridge becomes headmistress of Hogwarts. And that's the world she thrives in. Total authoritarian control. It's a chilling what-if that confirms exactly the kind of person she always was. The Cursed Child, which, depending on your canon tolerance, may or may not count, goes into some detail about what that timeline looked like. Voldemort won because Cedric Diggory, humiliated by time travel interference, joined the Death Eaters and killed Neville Longbottom at the Battle of Hogwarts. Without Neville, nobody destroyed Nagini. Without Nagini destroyed, Voldemort survived, and in the world that followed, Umbridge got everything she ever wanted. Hogwarts celebrated something called Voldemort Day, an annual holiday honoring the Dark Lord's victory. The curriculum was rewritten to glorify pureblood supremacy. Muggle-borns were hunted, and in one of the darker details, students were encouraged to practice the Cruciatus Curse on captured Muggle-borns in the school dungeons. Umbridge oversaw all of it with the same polite smile and pink cardigan she wore while making Harry carve words into his own hand. Some fan theories suggest the four houses were abolished in this timeline, replaced with a single Slytherin-dominated structure, though the play leaves that ambiguous. Scorpius Malfoy, the only person aware that this timeline was wrong, had to navigate this version of Hogwarts while pretending to support it. Umbridge treated him like a star pupil, which might be the most uncomfortable detail of all. The timeline was eventually corrected, but it served its narrative purpose, showing fans that Umbridge would build it if nobody stopped her, and it looked about as pleasant as everyone imagined. Now, let's shift gears entirely, because the Harry Potter fandom did not wait for Rowling to deliver justice. They wrote it themselves, and the fan fiction about Dolores Umbridge's fate is one of the most prolific and intense subgenres in the entire fandom. The most common category is trial and punishment stories, detailed courtroom dramas where Umbridge faces the full weight of wizarding law. One popular fic called The Trial of Dolores Umbridge posted on one of the largest fanfiction archives. In it, Minister Shacklebolt reads off the charges: cooperation with Voldemort, framing a Hogwarts student for underage magic, harming underage witches and wizards with archaic punishments like the blood quill, manipulating Dementors for personal purposes, and systematic harassment of half-bloods and Muggle-borns. Another fic, The Sentencing of Dolores Jane Umbridge, takes the bold approach of telling the story from Umbridge's own perspective, as she faces judgment. These stories scratch an itch the books never did. They give fans the courtroom reckoning they always wanted. Then there are the revenge stories, and these are extremely popular. Less about legal justice and more about catharsis. The Doom of Dolores Umbridge has a brilliant premise. The Daily Prophet leaks that Umbridge hasn't been properly punished, so McGonagall and Trelawney take matters into their own hands. The idea of Minerva McGonagall, who had to bite her tongue through every single one of Umbridge's educational decrees, finally getting to act on that barely concealed fury? Chef's kiss. The fic includes a great moment where Trelawney announces that the former undersecretary thought she could quietly retire unpunished. And since nobody in the government had bothered to hold her accountable, they decided to handle things personally. This is peak fanfiction energy right here. The parody and dark comedy fics take things in an entirely different direction. The Punishment of Dolores Jane Umbridge from 2012 features Voldemort himself confronting Umbridge. He tells her flat out that he hates her. Everybody hates her. She has zero menace, and if there's one thing he needs to protect in this fandom, it's his reputation for being terrifying. When even the Dark Lord thinks you're too much, you know you've achieved peak villain status. That fic captures something real about the fandom's relationship with Umbridge. She's so hated that she transcends the story itself. She stopped being Harry's antagonist a long time ago. She belongs to the entire fandom now. On the darker end of the spectrum, there are violent revenge fics that don't pull punches. Harry Potter Murders Dolores Umbridge is described as a short, crackish one-shot about the boy who lived and the woman in pink. The Rise of the Last Potter makes the argument that prolonged suffering is a better punishment for someone like Umbridge than a quick death. These stories exist because Umbridge triggers something primal in readers. She represents every petty authority figure who abused their power, every bureaucrat who chose cruelty when they could have chosen compassion. People want more than her defeat. They want her to understand what she did. There's also a recurring trope in fan fiction that's genuinely clever: blood quill justice. Multiple stories feature Umbridge being forced to write lines with her own blood quill, the same instrument of torture she used on Harry and other students. I must not tell lies, carved into Harry's hand. These fics flip it. They make her write with it. It's simple, it's satisfying, and it mirrors the crime perfectly. And then there's a more controversial category worth mentioning briefly. A significant number of fan fiction explores what happened to Umbridge when she was dragged into the Forbidden Forest by the Centaurs in Order of the Phoenix. The interpretation draws from the fact that centaurs in ancient Greek mythology were associated with certain things we can't talk about on YouTube, and some fan writers have applied that mythology to the Harry Potter universe. Major fan fiction archives have dedicated tags for this. It's contested and controversial within the fandom, with many fans arguing it's a misreading of the source material. I'll leave it at that. Now, here's something that brings this full circle in the most unexpected way. Umbridge's story got a brand new chapter, not from a book or a film, but from a theme park ride. Universal Epic Universe opened its gates, and one of its flagship attractions is called Harry Potter and the Battle at the Ministry. The main villain? You guessed it, Dolores Umbridge. The ride story picks up right at her trial. Guests visit the British Ministry of Magic and discover their visit falls on the same day Umbridge stands trial for her crimes. During the proceedings, she attempts to escape with the help of Death Eaters, trying to steal a time turner, and riders are recruited to help Harry, Ron, and Hermione stop her. The attraction takes you flying through the Ministry on a magical lift, through never-before-seen locations like the Ministry of Archives and the Department of Magical Creatures, and features returning characters like Yaxley, McNair, the Carrows, and Kingsley Shacklebolt, plus a new house elf character named Higgledy. The best part? Imelda Staunton came back. More than 14 years after she last played Umbridge in Deathly Hallows Part 1, Dame Imelda Staunton reprised the role for this ride. She had previously expressed doubt that she'd ever return to the franchise, but she did. The ride's creative director, Kim Gritzer, said Staunton was so excited to be Umbridge again, and was so professional and kind, which is hilarious when you think about it, because the character she plays is neither of those things. The ride ends exactly how it should. Umbridge is recaptured, put back in her prison uniform in front of Minister Shacklebolt, and sentenced to Azkaban for her continued crime spree. The attraction won the THEA Ride Experience Award, which is essentially the Oscar of themed entertainment. So, that's the complete story of Dolores Umbridge after the Deathly Hallows. Tried in the same courtroom where she prosecuted innocents. Convicted of torture, imprisonment, and deaths. One destroyed. sentenced to life in a reformed Azkaban without Dementors. Her father lost his only income, her legacy reduced to a cautionary tale. And yet, somehow, even all of that wasn't enough for the fandom, who wrote hundreds of stories imagining even more creative forms of justice. Rowling once explained that the name Dolores means sorrow, and said it reflects something she undoubtedly inflicts on all around her. But in the end, the sorrow came back for Dolores. Not through dark magic or dramatic violence, but through something far more mundane and far more fitting. A courtroom, a verdict, and a cell. The ultimate punishment for a woman who worshipped power and was having every last shred of it taken away. So, goodbye Dolores Umbridge and good riddance. Now, moving on. The locket is gone, every Horcrux destroyed, and Voldemort is finished. Probably. But could a wizard bring Voldemort's soul back? Well, that's your next lesson here at Stickman Hogwarts. Click now before Umbridge starts planning a prison break.